It is 6 o'clock, right on the dot. Thank you to everybody who has hopped on right at the top of the hour. This is the June welcome gathering for California Working Families Party. It felt like it's been a very long time since our last welcome gathering. A lot has happened since then. I'll provide updates later on in this evening, but welcome back to folks who are returning, and welcome to folks who are brand new. My name is Aiden Rodriguez Swanson. I am the California statewide senior organizer with WFP. If you are new here or if you are returning, please just say hi in the chat, introduce where you're from. No obligation to do so, but it's always nice to see where folks are joining from this evening. It is 6:01. If folks hop on late, they are completely fine. This is a recording that will be available up on YouTube afterward should people miss it. But to get us all started, I like to go over the same community agreements that we go over every single time, and these being that these main three, regardless if we are in a virtual space or a physical space, these three I see as like some of the most important things to bring into a conversation when we are having them. So these three being take space and make space. So if you are someone who, I'll start with the latter part first. If you are someone who often talks in situations in spaces like this, I encourage you, if there are other people about, just maybe hold back on your thoughts for a little bit. Not that you shouldn't share them at all, but be cognizant of others and if you're taking up a lot of space there. At the same time, if you are new to this space, if you are shy about introducing yourself and like sharing your thoughts, I encourage you to take space. This is a space that is welcoming for everybody, not just folks who are familiar with who I am and who WFP is. I always love to hear new folks, especially brand new folks, where they're joining from. Second thing, what happens here stays here, and what is learned here leaves here. So any of the interactions that we have with one another, this has never been an issue, but things that we talk about, things that we focus on, let's leave that stuff here, but then everything that we learn that can help us better our work, better our understanding of one another, let that carry with us as we move outward from this event, or this meeting, I guess. And lastly, and I think the most important one to really be mindful of, is speak from your own experience using I statements. So, for example, if I said, chocolate is terrible, regardless of my stance on it or not, it's a very definitive statement. I'm clearly saying chocolate is bad. But if I say, oh, I think chocolate is terrible, one, I could be wrong in my opinion completely, but two, I preface it with my understanding of like, oh, this is something that I believe in and that I think. It allows us to have a conversation, allows us to have a dialogue with one another, and understanding where different people are coming from in different conversational pieces. So really important to use I statements and speak from your own experience when you are sharing your thoughts and anything there. Super important just to be mindful that other people are sharing their thoughts and to engage one another with that understanding. So those are some of the main agreements. I hope everyone is okay with those three. If there are others at this time, feel free to introduce them and mention them in the chat. I'll get to them time permitting. But going into like the main point of this session, we host these welcome gatherings every first Monday of the month. I know today is the 10th, so this is the second Monday of the month. We were still recovering from our convention last week that ended the day prior, so people really exhausted. It was a lot of things just didn't coincide to have that happen that first Monday. So we moved it to the second Monday, but we will be back in July, back to the first Monday of the month. So going into the main point of this evening is talking about who we are as WFP, both nationally and as California WFP, and focusing on the party we need based off of our theory of change. Our theory of change is basically what we see as the issues and how we involve ourselves in the political process to address these issues, and what can we do to help make things better as we see them. So first and foremost is kind of having a goal in mind, having something that we are reaching toward, and this is what we call our North Star. Our North Star, as you can imagine, is our guiding light that we use to direct a lot of the work that we focus on, not only to guide us along the way, but also a destination that we want to get to. So that being to build a multiracial, feminist, working people's political party of the American left that wins governing power to enact a structural reform agenda to save the planet and all the people on it. Clearly lays out who we want to build with, so the multiracial, feminist, working people of America, what we aim to get specifically. So it is governing power. It is not just like, oh, we want to pass specific policies. Yes, that is part of the larger thing that we are working toward, but the main piece of all that, in order to pass that legislation, in order to pass those policies, we have to win governing power. And then with that, and with the people that we have brought with us along the way, the goal from all that is to save the planet, and there's a plethora of ways that can be done through different policies and all the people on it. This is not to say like, oh, we are just here to support our own folks. This is for everybody because we are all living on this planet together. And this will take everybody understanding that to get us there. So that is a very simple North Star. It is a short sentence, but it really encompasses a whole lot. And I'll explain how we kind of got to this point and what this actually looks like in practice. So moving forward, as I mentioned, our North Star and like our theory of change revolves around what our goals are, what we see as the challenges, and how we operate within those challenges to get to our goals. So that being, what do we see as the main struggles in the United States as it stands currently? It's easy to list off a million different reasons and a million different struggles that exist within the US. But for right now, we are focusing on these main four as they come up here. And I'm putting them all up at once, but I'll break down one by one what they each mean. So just reading it out loud for folks, in no particular order, of course: the authoritarian white nationalist takeover of the GOP, of course being the Republican Party, the Democratic Party controlled by wealthy and corporate forces, Democrats losing working class people of all races, and then finally, the two-party system limits our room to maneuver. So jumping into each of these, talking about the first one, the authoritarian white nationalist takeover of the GOP. This is and been an ongoing process. Their roots are obviously not too different from where they are now in terms of like their belief systems and everything, but this is basically to identify that they are moving from the party of just Donald Trump to a party of white nationalism that appears in many different ways. This poses a clear and present danger to communities all across the country, and then especially all across the world, as we are not just a country that sticks to just internal issues. We like to have our foreign policy be an extension of our belief system. So white nationalism that appears here in the US often shows up in foreign policy that affects marginalized communities, working class communities across the globe. So how do these kind of show up? I mean, I don't think anyone needs to be really reinformed about how this shows up, but just for example, this shows up as incitements of racial violence, attacks on wokeness and political correctness, the whole snowflake stuff, a bunch of nonsense that when you really push them to identify what they see as the issue, they just get stuck on all the buzzwords because that's what they've been led to believe. This also shows up as restricting what decisions we can make about our bodies, the rising Christian theocracy that is showing up, open attacks on democracy, violence against places hosting drag shows, and passing laws to erase entire groups of people. This shows up in local level, it shows up nationally. It's not just something, unfortunately, limited to just one part of the country or to one specific level of government. This shows up all across the board here in California, all the way on to the national level. Next, we see the other political party and what they are currently standing for. And they have been, the Democratic Party has been controlled by corporate and wealthy forces, individuals, companies. And this is what makes it more difficult to really address, because on one level, the Democrats, they have a pretty okay record of defending basic rights. However, that only extends to more social issues once they are pressured to do so. But they often normalize the status quo. They are maintaining an electoral system, and more importantly, an economic system that really the working class and middle class of America bear the brunt of. This is a problem for many reasons, but it basically shows up as, on social issues, Democrats are fairly good at saying the right things, passing the right legislation, but when it comes to large structural things like economic stuff, like tax things, they are quick to just follow in line with their funders and their donors in not addressing the core structural issues that exist that enable people to hoard all this wealth. And whether they are blind to it, oblivious, or just willfully ignorant of it, they don't see or don't care to see the connection between economic issues and the systems that are in place now with how social issues are addressed as well. So for whatever reason they choose to ignore those things, it is something that they do ignore, and that shows up being that, okay, yeah, on social issues they might be good, but it doesn't show up for economic things. And so before I get to the other piece, this is the other one that I mentioned, that the two-party system limits our room to maneuver. And this shows up in many ways, but some of them are when a third-party candidate runs for office, there's always the risk of them being a spoiler, which is basically them showing up in a race where they are then not able to run openly because they're fearful of taking away votes from the Democrats or allowing a worse off candidate to take office. It limits our ability to choose good candidates because we are stuck in a two-party binary choice that is often and sometimes not really as binary as it may seem. It forces people to be strategic, so in that same ballpark, whereas candidates running third party are stuck figuring out how they maneuver a two-party system, voters themselves are stuck between having to pick the lesser of two evils, as it often is called, where it's like, oh, I hate both of these people, but these are my only two options. Who do I vote for? And then you're stuck with quote-unquote strategic voting. I'm like, okay, I really don't like them, but I hate this person even more, so I'm going to go with the person that I really dislike, if someone chooses to vote. And then for campaigns, it puts the emphasis on swing voters. It really emphasizes to campaigns and candidates who exist within the system that the folks that who they should be representing, the working class individuals, they are the ones who aren't the swing voters. The swing voters are the folks that are like, oh, you know, maybe on a Tuesday I'll vote for Trump, on Wednesday I'll vote for Obama, and then Thursday I'll vote for Romney, and Friday I'll vote for Biden. For whatever reason that they keep flip-flopping, they're the folks that campaigns and candidates end up focusing on, and swing voters, for the most part, are not representative of the entire demographic, let alone the working class demographic here in the United States. So there are a bunch of reasons why the two-party system really limits our room to maneuver, because it just puts the emphasis on so many wrong things that are not reflective of what democracy should look like. And lastly, the one that I kind of glanced over, and I'll talk about it a bit more here in a second, is Democrats losing working class people of all races. And we see this happening in a bunch of ways. We see this happening where folks are like, oh, I'm just apathetic to politics. Both parties are corrupt. I don't like listening to them. This is not just white working class individuals leaving the Democratic Party for whatever issues that the Democrats aren't aligned with them on. This is working class people of all races choosing to leave the Democratic Party because there's a misalignment in values, and the Democrats not pushing back on their control of the wealthy and corporate forces that control them to really address the issues that working class individuals need to see passed. One of the graphs that I've pulled a couple of months ago that I saw was this very interesting graph of like where we see the political divide based off of wealth. So the poorest third of individuals in the United States, this is the full United States, this is not just California, but the poorest third being the blue line, middle third being that grayish line, and then the richest third being the red line. You can see that for most of the 70s through the mid 2010s, it was pretty clear that there was a stark difference between where folks saw alignment, where there was a lot, the poorest third were more in the camp of the Democrats, the richest third were more for Republicans. And as we approach the more recent years post 2010, post 2020, and then as we look to see how this is going based off the trajectory, we could definitely see a flip in where the poorest third find their allegiance in the political parties, as well as the richest third flipping over to the Democratic Party as they are more aligned with their economic values and everything. This obviously is not just like, oh, no one president or no one individual is responsible for this shift. However, you can see that things kind of started to change in 2008-ish. Not that anything really big or crazy happened around 2008, so surely it's a coincidence. But not going to go and get into that whole conversation now. Continuing along with what the focus of this session is basically going back to the whole idea of how we operate within a two-party system. So this is normally what people think about when they think about a third party. You think of the Democrats, you think of the Republicans, and then you think of a spoiler. That's how people visualize a third party that exists typically in the United States. But putting it simply, a political party doesn't have to be defined by just those narrow criteria. A political party, as we define it includes these four pieces here. So it's people organizing together to do elections. So you have the people, you have what they are doing around a platform governed by a clear ideology. So this is basically a rehashed version of the North Star that I mentioned before. It's who's part of this, what are they doing, what are they organized around, and what's guiding them. So it's both reflective of the North Star and references the North Star being the ideology piece. But that is how we broadly define a political party. There's obviously much more to it than just that. But to keep it simple for folks, because in California we don't appear on the ballot, we don't have a ballot line, but somewhere like New York, they do have a WFP ballot line. So it's really important to know that a political party can exist in two very different states, in very different ways, but still both be a political party. And I'm not going to read this one out here because I encourage folks to check out Maurice Mitchell's statements and everything that he's made recently at our convention. So if you were unaware, California WFP had our first ever convention. What was it, last weekend? No, 2 weekends ago. I've lost track of time. Time's crazy. But May 31st through June 2nd, we had our first ever convention here in California. And I think one of the benefits of it is we had so many great speakers from all around California, folks from national. And Murray spoke at our Saturday morning event. And rather than try to read out what he says and do it justice, I encourage folks to check out the live stream that it should be on our YouTube page still. If you are watching this on YouTube currently and you're watching this in the live section, it is, I think, the second convention video. But I encourage folks to watch the opening night ones too. We had folks from Philly join us. We had amazing speakers then. We had more people on Saturday. But if you are just interested in hearing directly from Maurice Mitchell, I encourage you to watch the Saturday morning session where he speaks and really lays out his vision and the general broad vision of WFP as it exists. But moving on from like a larger national thing to specific to California, the circumstances that we find ourselves in is very different than what national kind of does or other states do. California is infamous, I would say, for being a blue state. Whether you are a Democrat or Republican, everyone understands California to be a blue state, where it's like, okay, no matter what, it'll always vote blue. And that only works for a certain extent. For presidential races, that is definitely the case. But once you look down ballot and you look at things more on the local level, or even things statewide that are non-national, you have a very different view of what California actually looks like and how California actually votes. So in the same election year, we had in 2020, 4 years ago already. Why is this not working? I was in the middle of a thing and something popped up. But basically, blue on the surface, so Biden easily won California. But that same election, when it came down to a something to address Prop 13 here in California, the vote was very different. Same election again, but very different in terms of the results here. Red being areas that voted no, blues being areas that voted yes. So California has this fishhook that exists that basically maintains a strong rightward, and I'm not saying Republican, because Republicanism doesn't necessarily equate to right-wing beliefs here in California. It's not as clear-cut as in some of the areas, but more right-leaning, rightward areas into the Central Valley, Inland Empire, San Diego to some extent, and then Orange County. So areas that still voted blue for the most part in the presidential, but then vote red when it comes to more localized issues. So with that, we were like, okay, how do we, as WFP, how do we as a political party, again, not necessarily defined by the common political party sense, how do we tackle a full state that has this? And so what was decided was that the statewide governing body of WFP in here in California would be made up of 3 pillars that would form our steering committee. And these 3 pillars are statewide labor unions, statewide community C4s, so not C3s, but C4s, so folks able to get engaged with the political process on an electoral stage, and then the regional charters as well. And California is a massive state, and it did not make sense to have just one steering committee body oversee the entire state and make decisions from anything statewide down to local issues. So what was done was to break up California into these 7 regional charters. The Bay Area, Central Coast, Central Valley, LA County, Orange County, Inland Empire, and San Diego. Central Valley extends all the way up to Sacramento. For those interested, so if you are in Sacramento, you are part of the Central Valley crew. And then as well, each of these regional charters needed their own steering committees, and so these regional steering committees were made up of, again, labor unions, community C4s that existed both maybe locally or part of the larger C4 network that exists for a statewide org, and then individual members. So individual dues-paying members are a part of the regional steering committee, and they can become member reps that actually get to sit on these statewide committees and vote in endorsements and the decision-making process. Uh, Quick overview. This is basically what who makes up WFP when it comes to like the regional governing bodies and the statewide governing body. We had statewide organizations here listed on the left, and as well as the regional and local organizations listed here per region. And I don't think we've added anyone new recently, but folks are always bringing in their orgs, or like another org is interested. So this isn't going to be the end all be all for all these orgs. There'll be more that get added as WFP continues to grow. But prior to jumping into this year, we really looked back and decided with the steering committee what was the best way to tackle 2024. There was a lot of routes that any organization, especially a statewide electoral organization, can do to get involved in all the different elections. So it was important for us to prioritize and have like some guiding strategic directions on what we wanted to focus on. So in order this time of like priority 1, 2, and then 3. First priority, as we saw it, was to expand the state legislative squad in about 4 to 5 key races, upgrade folks from more like maybe moderate and Lib Dem to more progressives, so 3 in the Senate and then 2 in the Assembly. If this doesn't make sense, I will get into in the next couple of slides of what exactly upgrading and expanding the legislative squad looks like and who is in that space. Focusing on the pipeline development for local races, so board of supervisors, municipal races, school board, water district, what have you. Not all the areas are going to be focused on just state legislative races. There are some areas that are solely focused on some of the smaller races, and not that they're small because they're less important, but small just in terms of geography and like general attention focused on them. And then finally, working with the federal team to take back 2 to 4 of the congressional swing seats, and then at the same time, hopefully expand progressives in Congress. So those are the 3 main strategic directions that we have. As we continue through this year, we are already halfway through the year. We've made it to the primary, and this still holds true for our strategic directions. As I mentioned just a second ago about our whole legislative focus on these things, this is, you can also refer back to this at any point, because again, the live stream will stay living and alive on YouTube, so you can refer back to it at any time. But this is basically our power mapping of sorts of the current breakup of the Assembly. So if you are unfamiliar with the state legislative process, we have the state Assembly, we have a state Senate, basically the House of Representative equivalent for state legislature, and then a Senate equivalent as well. And then they pass legislation in each respective chamber, and then it goes to Governor Newsom to sign, veto, what have you. But there's 2 chambers, that's the important piece, and then it goes to the governor. So 3 bodies that it needs to pass through, and not to include all the other things that could happen in that space. But essentially, there are 80 seats in the Assembly. 62 of them are currently Democrats. 53 votes are needed to have a 2/3 supermajority. 41 votes needed for a majority. So just right off the bat, Democrats easily control the Assembly. There's no worry about, oh, Republicans could take back the Assembly. This is what it's going to be. This is how it's going to stay. And obviously the numbers will shift here and there during different elections, but for the most part, Democrats have a firm control over the Assembly. However, not all Democrats are created equal or equally reflect Democratic values. Of those 62, 24 of them are in a broad base that we consider progressive. They may not be fantastic on all issues, but they are more aligned with progressive values than not. And those are the 24 listed out here. And so the folks that are highlighted in purple are individuals that we have endorsed. So these are folks that like, okay, they're pretty good in terms of like how we consider them to be progressive because we have endorsed them. We have worked with them in some to some extent, and we know that they will stand up for working class voters and individuals across the state. Green are the seats that are going to be open or are open currently, so there's room to expand too. So there's room to expand from just a green to hopefully a purple, so they just don't end up being just a broad general kind of progressive. Next in line from there, there's 10 liberals. These are folks that, again, are just liberal in the typical milquetoast Democratic sense. They are just very bleh. They are not super corporate, not super progressive. They just exist for who knows whatever reason, but they exist there. And so they are often folks that need to be persuaded a bit more to hop on to progressive legislation. But doing some quick math, 24 plus 10 only gets us to 34. 41 votes are needed for a majority. So what that ends up meaning is, despite if all progressives and then all 10 of the liberals are on board with the legislation, it is not enough for it to pass the assembly, even just with a simple majority. On the other side of things are 28 corporate Dems who exist, and then 18 Republicans. The 18 Republicans will typically stay in their 18 Republican zone without ever joining progressives on most legislation that will make meaningful difference. It's the 28 corporate Dems that often stifle and stop progress from happening. Not to say that progressives or liberals don't, as in these categories, but it's the corporate Dems that need to be relied on, unfortunately, for more of the votes to get us to the 41 majority and still a ways away from the 53 two-thirds supermajority. And you can see how many of those seats are open in this cycle. So there are 7 for the progressives, 2 for the liberal, 4 for the corporate Dems, and then 2 for the Republicans this 2024. So the assembly is just half of the battle there. When we look at the Senate, things aren't as good, unfortunately. It is only 40 seats, so half the amount of the assembly. Again, we have 32, we being Democrats in a broad sense. 32 of them are Democrats, 27 votes are needed for the two-thirds supermajority, 21 votes needed for a majority. Here on the left side, we have about, again, 10 broad general progressives. Again, it's not the clear-cut, they are progressive, that means they are good. I would say the folks that are in purple are the folks that have made it past our screening, have made it past our endorsement, so that they're easier for us to point to and say, hey, yeah, we understand this person as progressive. So 10 progressives, 4 liberal Dems, and then 18 corporate Dems. So very different shift of balance that exists here. Corporate Dems outnumber the progressive liberal Dem combination, where it wasn't that case previously in the assembly. Not only that, but the corporate Dems have 3 of the important chair committee seats, and chair seats in different committees are the folks who decide if a bill gets heard or not. So if a corporate Dem is like, nah, they take money from big oil, they take money from the apartment associations, what have you, they can be like, okay, this bill doesn't get heard. My funders, my donors don't like this. Again, this is completely legal. There's obviously million things wrong with it, but they're not doing anything that could legally get them in trouble. They are doing things that benefit their own pockets and their own power, as well as the power and profits of those who fund them. So the Senate is a lot harder to manage and navigate because of this balance of power or imbalance of power, where corporations have an outweighed influence over the legislature. But the benefit is there are 8 open seats in 2024 for these corporate Dems, which allow us to upgrade these from corporate Dems over to the progressive seats. So it's not just like, okay, this is going to remain, and they're going to remain at 18. We shift them from 18 to hopefully 10, 11, 12, 13 in the progressive camp. And as I mentioned earlier, we have our current squad that exists. The folks here listed on the left side this is going through all of them right now. You have Aisha Wahab, Carolyn Menjivar, Lola Smalo Cuevas, Eloise Gomez Reyes, Liz Ortega, Alex Lee, Ash Kalra, Isaac Bryan, Corey Jackson, and then Tina McKinnon. And then folks that we would hopefully hope to see added in this coming year, and this is just two of them right now, are being Sasha Renee Perez and Sade El Hawari, both running in LA County. So we hope to see that the folks that we have are not just going to be these 10, but we get at least 12. Marisol Rubio is also running, and I believe there are a couple more that I'm blanking on off the top of my head. But there's definitely room. Javanka Beckles is another one as well. But there's folks in different regions that we can hope to build out all of these, the power that we have in the state legislature. But the legislature is not the only arena that we fight in. We also fight against recalls, and we're seeing recalls become more weaponized as Republicans and conservatives and right-wing folks use this as like a typical playbook against any progressive at any level. So we fought back against the recall of Jesse Lopez successfully. Jesse Lopez is a Santana City Council member in Orange County. She was one of the first WFP folks that we endorsed in 2020. She was basically threatened by the police officers association down there because they wouldn't because she wouldn't like follow their every order and like pass things that would not benefit her community. So they launched a recall against her. It was successful in getting onto the ballot, but it was unsuccessful in passing after we fought it. And this is obviously something that we saw in San Francisco, the recall of Chesa Boudin, the district attorney up there. There was the attempted recall attempt of Aisha Wahab. There was the attempted recall attempt of District Attorney George Gascon in LA. So this has become the playbook of right-wing forces, and oftentimes we see these recalls are largely based off of nothing. I mean, one of the examples I like to point to is for the Chesa recall. The recall actions started taking place within the first week of him getting into office. So it wasn't a response or reflection of his track record in office. He had 7 days. His seat was still cold from him not sitting in it enough. There was not enough evidence to support a recall happening so early on. They just didn't like him from the get-go, and they've seen this as the playbook just to force recalls onto the ballot, and then folks get recalled from there. In addition to that, we also like to uplift and support the candidates that we have in office. So we will host town halls with individuals. We held one with Fu Zhang up in, or down, I guess, since I'm based in the Bay Area, down in Merced. We had Lisette Espinosa Garnica in Redwood City. We've had one with Peter Ortiz in San Jose. These are just town halls that emphasize and uplift the policies that our current candidates, as they are elected officials, are pushing for. So folks are aware of the actual things that we're like, hey, you supported this person, now get to see the fruits of your labor, and like this is what they're pushing for. We also like to do socials. This is something that we see as super important. It's not enough to just do the hard work all the time. It is also great to hang out with one another. If folks are interested in any events that we have coming up, !events in the chat, and it should pop up. The Mobilize for any of the upcoming events, everything that we host will be up on Mobilize. In timely fashion, the next upcoming trivia night for June for LA WFP is next Tuesday. Tomorrow? I should have looked it up, should have kept it on that thing. I think it is tomorrow, actually, the 11th. So if you are in LA County and it's near your area, hop onto the Mobilize. RS3P, Hannah Kessel, our SoCal organizer, runs these. They are super fun from what I've heard. They are not super competitive, but competitive enough where you want to beat the other teams there. Great place to get involved. And I like to kind of just wrap it up with who the team is. Our California team, we are our state director is Jane Kim, former supervisor in San Francisco. Our deputy director, took me forever to say that. Deputy director is Jorge Contreras, and then our senior federal affairs strategist is Adam Gold. But if you want to get in touch with any of the organizers in your region, I am based in the South Bay myself, but I am the senior statewide organizer. You are more than welcome to CA WFP. We should take you to the link tree. The link tree has all of our links, all of the stuff to get in touch with us. Any events that we have coming up, any big actions that we're taking, you can connect with us there. You can hop onto our Discord. There are a bunch of ways to stay in touch with us. I encourage folks, if you do not know who your organizer is for your region, just set up a meeting with them. Everyone should have their Calendly up on the link tree, so set up a meeting with them, 30 minutes. Just let them know what you are interested in, what's going on in your region. We are getting close to the endorsement season where we'll be screening a bunch of candidates for office. So a lot of things going on there in the near future. Lastly, we are a member-based organization. If I did that correctly, dues-paying member of WFP. This allows us to fund all the work that we're doing. It goes directly into supporting the candidates, the work that we're doing on the ground to both defend our existing candidates and our elected officials, as well as get new ones into office to really represent the values of working class Californians. If folks have questions about anything I said, about any of those things, you are more than welcome to ask in the chat. You, again, do not need to. I welcome folks too if they would like to. This is a really quick welcome gathering because we are still recovering again from convention. I really encourage folks to check out any of the recordings. You don't have to like watch it. So if you're more just like the listening type, you can just listen to it. I believe there's 3 recordings up on our YouTube live stream. One from Friday night, one from Saturday morning that has Maurice Mitchell, and then a women in labor panel, I believe, is the third recording. So if you missed the convention, if you are just interested in seeing how it went, I would highly encourage you to check out that and watch. And again, becoming a dues-paying member of California WFP allows you to fund directly the work that we're doing, as well as hopefully maybe if you want to get more involved, become a member rep with WFP. Any recurring monthly donation amount allows you to become a dues-paying member. So if you can't give $10, $5, if you can't do $5, even $1 a month, that goes a long way. You would actually be surprised how much $1 and then $12 over the course of a year can support a small local candidate. Now that we are finding a lot of tools and resources that make campaign stuff accessible for these small dollar races just throughout the state. But with that, unless folks have any final questions, if folks have any final thoughts, anything they would like to share, that might be the end. This might be the record 44-minute welcome gathering. But if folks also just want to continually hang out, our Discord is a virtual space that we use to just talk about upcoming events, anything that we have going on in our regions. So I encourage folks to, if they are interested, hopping onto the Discord. There's no obligation to do anything once you're there. It's more just a space to kind of keep up to date with the different things that we have, to talk to one another, engage in conversation. We'll have movie nights there sometimes, but it basically exists as a virtual space when we don't have like a WFP office for folks to be in, especially since we are statewide. So again, encourage, if that is something that you are interested in, again, and also no obligation to do anything once you're there if you just want to lurk and read. But with that being said, and seeing no questions in the chat, if I'm looking correctly, let me just double check. But with that, then, I thank everybody for joining this evening. I hope everyone is staying relatively cool. I don't know if it's super hot in everybody's region, but I look forward to working with folks and continuing to go out with and engage with folks as we continue this year. So with that, I would like to thank everybody once again and hope you have a fantastic rest of your night. Take care.